Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Michael and Rusty Show. I'm Rusty Harrison. Today, we're going to be talking about the recent renovations to the Rogers Center as Michael has a position helping the Blue Jays in their uh, game services. So, we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to shift our focus to the NHL and the regular season finale, which I guess the season ends officially tomorrow. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, but we know who's going to be in, and we know at least some of the series. So we're going to try to talk about that, as well as some of the news regarding tonight and the subsequent off season for some of these teams that have been eliminated. So it's going to be a pretty full evening, but I want to first start with Michael. You were at the Blue Jay game last night, the second game of the season at home for the Blue Jays against Detroit Tigers. So tell us about your experience. It was your first night as part of the Blue Jays staff. Tell us what happened and your thoughts.
Well, just to clarify this interpretation, I'm working as fan services or guest
Right.
services.
Yeah.
My role exclusively is support staff, which is the likely the utility role, if you want to talk about baseball terminology, utility role or designated hitter. You need to be, I should say, I need to be working as either an usher or as a gate staff. And last night I did both. I did the gate for the first couple hours, and then after the 30-minute break, I went on to finish the game at a particular section as an usher, like helping another usher out. The experience, and I have been doing a lot of on-site training back in mid-March and then back last weekend, actually, for rehearsal. And I got the chance to see the stadium firsthand. And it is a well overdue upgrade from the original ballpark. Let's just say,
The
um,
layout.
yeah, layout configuration. This is the first massive renovation they have had since they opened it back in 1989. And just also to make it clear, this is not the only phase of the renovation that is to be done. There is the one that is just completed is the outfield with the outfield bars. Well, I should say outfield social areas, two on the 500 level, six in total. There's another two and a 200, and there's another two at the 100 level outfield. After this season and the playoffs to follow, the larger center is going to be upgraded once again with the 100 level seats being removed, just like they did with the 200 and the 500. And I got a chance to sit on one of the new seats, and it's a little bit more wide, not just as big as the original ones that you can still sit on at 100 level, but like from the baseline and like infield. But in terms of space, for big guys like myself, I think it will be a benefit to sit on. And if you do not need to sit, don't want to sit, and you want to enjoy playing video games or playing arcade games, the new and improved WestJet flight deck, along with other five other different new outfield areas, but only cost the $20. You can explore the areas and just have a good time. It's just not just for yourself, but it could be for your significant other or your family or a group as you go for a business trip or something. Mm-hmm. And excuse me. In regards to the experience last night, over 35,000 attended. It was a really good turnout. Blue Jays came from behind late and win the game 4-3 in extras.
Mm.
And most crowds, especially with rivalry games, and case in point, and anybody forgetting, Detroit and Toronto are geographical rivals because they are from the QEW 441. It's a long time rivalry. I think one of the very first rivalries Blue Jays ever had was with the Tigers.
And not only that, I mean, this was before you were born, but of course, I grew up watching the Blue Jays in the from the start, late '70s, but also in the '80s. Detroit was the team in the East that was the most successful, I would argue, in the '80s, and certainly both Detroit and Toronto had real nail biters at the end of the season in multiple seasons. So yeah, I mean it's a historic rivalry, but of course they're in separate divisions today. But I think there's still, personally in like my generation, like I support Detroit as well as Toronto. I'm getting more on the Toronto bandwagon as this newest crop of players develops. And Detroit's definitely in a rebuilding situation, but I agree with you. I mean, they're both historic rivals, and certainly if Detroit gets better in subsequent years, there's going to be even more intensity to the rivalry.
Yeah, and then also to point out that last night's game was like an equivalent if you guys have watched an OHL hockey game, Ontario Hockey League game. It's just about the same tempo as it is as for baseball as it is for major junior hockey. It lasted over 2.5 hours because of the new big rule is the pitch clock, and it's like if you have seen that, if you want the classical example or a pitcher with the classic as a classic example of how what the pitch clock is going to look like, or it is right now, I should say. Mark Burley.
Yeah.
He was, every time he does want to do that on himself, and he wants to get ready and he's like a workman's pitcher type of pitcher. And that's what you see in the pitch clock is going to be. It's going to give a lot of employees like myself just to hold off in between, like only in between innings or in between plays, like in between nows or home run and stuff. It's you have to adapt to the crowd control, especially at the top of sections.
It's amazing because I don't know exactly what the breakdown is for runs per game. I'm sure it's up because teams have to adjust to the fact that you don't have the time between pitches to wave off the pitcher, and there are situations like even I think in the it may have been last night's game because there was a time where a walk was awarded to the Tigers because Alejandro Kirk, the catcher of Toronto, couldn't agree with the pitcher. And so that's a situation that, it's even causing runs to be walked in certain cases. So, it's a critical change to the way the game is played and the way it's managed. You have a 3-batter rule, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So a pitcher comes in, a pitcher has to also not just account for the change with the batter that's currently up, but also the next 2 batters. So it does factor into when a potential pitching change is made. So it really does speed up the game. And it does put a lot more pressure on the pitcher, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of, your experience with the Jays in this role. What's your, how do you feel the fans are feeling in terms of the change? Like, do you see that there's just generally a more upbeat mood? Do you see that fans are enjoying the experience more, particularly the ones that are at those levels where you have more of an open setup?
Well, it's more to do with the different kinds of fans that you go to
Yeah,
Rogers Center. It's not just the old school baseball fans like us
yeah, the
to a
boomers.
degree.
Yeah,
Yeah, but there's also I see a lot of different fans, and it has been like that for the last several years as the baseball has evolved. But they want to integrate the fans, and I think attendance wise of last year in Major League Baseball as a whole wasn't as to par. It was slightly below. It's
yeah,
mainly due to
right.
the COVID aftermath, but the intent for baseball now these days is trying to get more of being more of an entertainment
Mm.
uh, thing rather than just simply baseball. And that's what I think Rogers Center, or you can call it Sky Dome, is had that renovation to integrate the those who wants to have a good time and entertainment, like to socialize, and at the same time you can join the like to support the Blue Jays, cheer for the team, and
I I don't know
think
if
different.
I don't know if it segregates the party types from the families, but I think that that might be the case.
Mm,
Like it'll be interesting to see what the it wouldn't be raw data, of course. It's just it's anecdote, but it'll be interesting to see how Jays fans that have been with the team for years and years, how they would see, like sitting in the regular seats.
yes.
You're going to have more family groups, right?
Yeah, okay, especially you have Junior J Saturdays and
Yeah,
school day games as well. You have more kids coming in. And also, you have to be aware of the fact that with the more open concept areas
hmm,
in the outfield, especially in the bullpens area, in the because there are deck couple of deck levels,
right.
not just the 100 level, but the one above it. For example, in the right field, the Schneider's
Yeah,
hot dog deck. They it's more they run it more open. So by the time they have the fly balls and or letting on home runs, everybody's trying to catch it, and the ushers, I think, will have to have a better sense and awareness of letting on the security staff
yeah,
to see if there is any kids coming, like going around on the deck level
yeah,
and trying to catch it, whether it is avoid falling down.
right.
That's an added challenge
Yep.
in addition to the crowd control for
Like
pitch clocks. And
I see the setup around the bullpens because now you have two levels in each bullpen, and the open level, which is the top level, the fans are much closer to, like, they can practically speak person to person with the opposing players, right?
yes,
So like, just the fact that those railings are not that high, would be a concern to me. Like if somebody gets really wasted and just wants to be an idiot, that could be a problem. But in general, I've heard that the fans have been pretty well behaved.
yeah, it was a pretty well behaved outing last night. For the most part, there'll be some skirmishes here and there, but not. It's just basically the norm of days. There'll be some troublemakers, but at the end of the day, it was generally positive. And even though it's not considered as today as a rivalry game between Tigers and Blue Jays, as we discussed it earlier, uh, the real test is going to be when the Yankees come, when the
Yeah.
Red Sox come, and other teams I can't think of out of my head right now, but it
Texas.
is Texas with the Blue Jays. It's gonna be a fun, interesting
Yeah.
measuring stick test of
Like there's heat always with the Yankees, and I would imagine with Red Sox too. But like the just on the field, it's been Texas the last 3 or 4 years. There's
yeah.
always something going on. So that's great. Let's move on. We'll keep talking about this because this is an ongoing story now that you're working with the Blue Jays. So it'll be great to hear your insights on things on that. But let's talk about the wrap up to the NHL season. It's going to be, I would say, like we're going to be partially talking about what we know because we have 3 divisions that are still up in the air in terms of who's going to win them. But let's talk first about your surprise or your feelings on Pittsburgh, for example, not making the playoffs for the first time in 16 years.
It's going to be interesting in the postseason when it's going to happen. I think it's later this week, if I'm not mistaken.
It's
Uh,
Monday.
Monday, okay.
Monday.
So come Monday, it'll be interesting to see not having a regular postseason entrant as in Washington and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Sidney Crosby missing the playoffs for the first time since his rookie season, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I
And
stand correctly.
Ovechkin too, eh?
And Ovechkin as well. Well, Ovechkin has missed the playoffs before,
Right.
8 years ago. So, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting postseason. Just to think of the couple, as we just said, the Capitals and Penguins no longer in the postseason. I know the postseason, I should say. And a team like Seattle Kraken back, it's only the second year in the league, going to the dance, and that's
And I think Marty Beniers is probably going to be the Calder Trophy winner. He's had a great year, and I'm looking forward to see how Seattle does. I was kind of hoping that they would run up against the Golden Knights, just simply because the Golden Knights are are now the second latest team to join the league. But I don't know if that's going to happen because the Golden Knights could probably clinch, and they would be facing, I guess, the Jets in the first round. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. But if you had to pick a Stanley Cup favorite right now, who would it be for you?
Boston.
Yeah.
Boston is the crown of the crown. But we have to be careful to not align season results with postseason results.
Yeah.
Because look what happened a few years ago with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay had almost identical, I think he had over 60 wins and got swept by a heavily underdog Columbus Blue Jackets squad. Sweated 4 straight. That was like one of the most craziest things I ever seen. Like I didn't
For me,
watch
it
too
was
much.
the craziest.
Probably was the craziest, yeah. And
No one picked Columbus. If there were 3 people in Columbus who were media who were following the team that picked Columbus, they would have their heads examined. To be honest, right? It was just nobody expected this, so that to me was a shock, But I agree with you about Boston. I'm a Montreal fan, so I'll put that down. And I also follow Detroit and Buffalo. But my head says Boston should win because they've been dominant. I just don't know about their goaltending. Do you have any worries about the fact that Allmark, who's their lead goalie, really doesn't have a playoff resume?
Yeah, that takes that. This is go back to I said about season results should differentiate or let alone consider nothing to what's going to happen in the playoffs because playoffs matter.
Mm.
It's for the holy grail of professional hockey,
Yep.
and you've got to step up every game because every game is going to be like a game seven feel. And if you do not produce, in the case for Linus Olmark,
Mm.
if you don't produce as a starting goaltender for the Boston Bruins in the playoffs, you're going to be ridiculed, and you'll be circumcised with how you deal with playoff pressure.
Mm.
Uh, Especially one of my idols, Curtis Joseph, back when he was in Toronto and years
And
before
especially Detroit.
Detroit, Edmonton, and St. Louis.
Yeah.
He has had a great career in the regular season. It's just in the postseason, he had a lot of good wins, but it wasn't
In
like
St. Louis, he was a dominant playoff goalie, and he
yeah,
did well in Edmonton. But it was when he was with Detroit, less so with Toronto, but I would say when he was with Detroit, he was supposed to be the difference maker, and it didn't happen.
no,
And I think that Boston has Slayman as the backup, and he's been superb this year. So it's not like there's a big drop off if Allmark falters, but still, in a short series, it can be the difference if you don't have a hot goalie. If you are shuffling between goalies, like I would prefer to have a hot hand always in the playoffs.
yeah, and you got a lot of good options in scoring like Bergeron and Marchand and
Yeah.
amongst others that the extensive playoff experience. So from that perspective, Boston would be okay.
Yeah.
Or I should say be fine, but just like we mentioned about goaltending, that's going to be the big question because they don't have Tim Thomas anymore.
No.
And they
No, and
don't have
that he was the difference maker. I mean, that year that they won the cup, Thomas
yeah,
had one of the greatest playoff runs in history, I think.
they don't even have Tuukka Rask as well. And
No.
he did a good job as the goaltender in the playoffs for Boston.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you gotta be very vigilant and stay the course to win the trip to the Stanley Cup final. Otherwise, it'll be teams like Tampa Bay or Toronto who
Which
coincidentally
I
is
want
going
to
to
talk
be
about.
facing one another, and it's yeah,
Now that series, to me, like I also feel the Rangers, if they can put things together, they're my dark horse. But
yeah,
obviously, whoever wins Toronto and Tampa Bay has to be figured in as well, because for me, like of all the teams that we can talk about, Carolina to me is the weakest of all the so-called elite teams in each conference. They certainly have more questions than anybody because they've had problems scoring. That's their big problem.
mhm.
But obviously, you're a Leaf fan. I've always respected you. I always love you as an uncle would. But what do you think about that series coming up?
The Leafs and the Lightning.
Yeah.
It's going to come down to goaltending. Uh, it's more likely that Samsonov is going to start for the Leafs. Murray has been an injury prone for a large part of the season. It's been at times been inconsistent. Samsonov has been really, really good, especially at home.
Yeah.
The defense, they're not getting any younger to the extent they Morgan Riley not too long ago just came back from injury. Giordano is in his 40s, and he has great playoff experiences. But at the end of the day, you need to have a stud defensive core, and
Riley really is the guy in terms of their blue line. I think that has to make the difference.
yeah, and when the forwards like Matthews and Marner and Nylander and the trade deadline acquisition, Ryan O'Reilly, John Tavares. they all gotta have to step up and put in a lot of minutes. I know they can, but they also the supporting cast of the Leafs need to be a little bit more better.
Yeah, like for me, last year's team should have done better. Obviously, they had the Canadians on the ropes, and somehow they just didn't. The series with Carey Price.
And they
They
said 6-0 speechless too. I remember
yeah,
that.
like I mean,
Excuse me.
it's incredible what they didn't do. They had that. They even had that series. I guess it was on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
That they were following the team, and we were able to see the meltdown as it was happening. But what I wanted to ask you about: do you agree with me that Tampa is at its most vulnerable, arguably since the Columbus collapse years ago, in terms of just limping into the playoffs? And really, if Toronto doesn't do this, doesn't come through and get the first round victory, that there will be massive changes in Toronto.
I do agree that they need massive changes in Toronto. It's going to be a mass exodus if they do
Yeah.
not go past round one. Well, let alone going into the Stanley Cup final, because this is a team that I think will compete for the Stanley Cup. It's just a matter of getting past round one. And let alone the Stanley Cup from the East is going to go through Boston.
Yeah.
I just think for Tampa, quickly about Tampa. Tampa is going to be, in a tough situation now than they have been the last 3 years with the Stanley Cup ones they had. I think the stock is going low right now with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Toronto has got to take advantage of that without a doubt. And it will be an interesting playoffs. But definitely, Toronto does not at least get to the Stanley Cup final this year. There will be considerable changes.
Is there any team in the West that you see as a possible winner? I mean, I think Colorado, for me, would be the favorite still in the West. I think Gordiev has been pretty good as a replacement for Darcy Kemper. But what do you see?
I see out of Colorado and Edmonton because this is David's biggest chance to date. He has had a prolific season, probably the most prolific season I ever seen watching hockey. It has been over the last 25 years or so. And yeah, he's a sure in for MVP. But can he and his supporting cast, along with the goaltending, propel the Oilers to the first championship in nearly 35 years? I think they got a good shot, but the road is definitely going to go through either Dallas or Colorado.
Okay. That's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed our talk about the NHL. We're going to have more coverage on the NHL as the playoffs proceed. So until next time, thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much for having me, Uncle S.
And we'll talk again soon. Take care.